It is 4 p.m. on a hump day here, and that means it's time for us to talk to our buddy Ross Tucker, Odyssey NFL Insider. Insider Calls brought to you by Nationwide. For your insurance and financial needs, Nationwide is on your side. Tried something different this week. Don't know if we love it. Ross joins us now on the Fan Hotline. Ross, welcome back to the show, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I did not love it in terms of the Nationwide. That was your worst one yet.
That's fair.
Secondly, let's go to the hotline and talk to our buddy. It feels like it's more like let's badger our nemesis, Ross Tucker, at 4 o'clock on Wednesday.
One dust up last week and we're nemesis?
No, that's what it feels like this segment is. And then I see you guys post stuff on social media and everybody replies, "Oh, this guy doesn't get it. I hate that." Although, you know what? Shout out to like the 3 or 4 people that had my back. I appreciate that.
Ross, we can't have your back when you're saying Dillon Gabriel's good at football. That's hard for us.
Yeah, we're truth brokers.
Whoa. Jonathan.
Ross.
I never said that. That is not what I said. I said I don't think he's been that bad, is what I said. And I know he's coming off of his worst game in that last game, but there's a big difference between saying Dillon Gabriel is good at football and saying I don't think he's been that bad. In the first game against the Vikings, he played, I thought, pretty darn well. And they should have won the game, and they would have won the game if the defense didn't let Carson Wentz march all the way down the field for a game-winning touchdown. The second game, he had no shot whatsoever with their 5th and 6th offensive tackles against the Steelers. Anybody that watched that game saw what that was about. His third game, they beat the Dolphins by 20 points or whatever. And the last game, he was bad.
Ross
Am
Tucker.
I wrong? I mean, is that? I mean, he started 4 games, right? Is that not the summary of the 4 games so far?
Let me see. I remember it as I thought he was acceptable against Minnesota. I thought he was awful against Pittsburgh. I thought he was actually worse than people realized against Miami.
Yeah, we actually got into a debate about that. I didn't think Miami was a bad game, and Nick thought that was a horrendous game.
I didn't say horrendous. I just thought it was worse than everybody who was crowning him just because the Browns won. And then I did think that was his worst game.
But Ross, coming off of a bye week, this should set up. The Jets are having a fire sale. They're sending their 2 best defenders to other places. Like, if Dillon doesn't perform this week, I don't know when he's ever going to perform. Is that fair?
I don't look at it that way when it's a rookie quarterback. I would say that it certainly sets up well for him, for sure. The only caveat there is the new play caller, which I think is interesting, very interesting on a lot of levels. But yeah, I would expect Gabriel to play well. I would expect him certainly to play better than he did. I can't even remember who they played the last game now. How do I remember the first 3 opponents? Who they played the last game? It was terrible.
The funny thing is, I'm struggling to remember it as well.
What happened to this bye week with all of us? The Patriots.
Anyway.
Yeah, totally.
I thought we were doing a bit, guys. I genuinely thought we were all doing a bit.
I legitimately in my head was going through the games, and I could remember the Vikings, Steelers, and Dolphins, but I couldn't remember who they played right before the bye. Yeah, I mean, listen, it certainly sets up for him to probably the best situation that he's been in so far this year. Playing against the Jets, they just traded 2 of their best defensive players. He had the bye. He got all the reps. I would just say it's so funny. Let me ask you guys this. Let's pretend they didn't take Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. What would you be saying then about Gabriel and what they should be doing at the quarterback position?
I didn't like him. I didn't like him in college. I thought he was too small. I didn't think he was.
No. I understand that, but I mean, once they have him now, and once they've taken him in the 3rd round. In other words, all I'm saying is, because they have Shedeur, and everybody is very curious, anxious to see how he'll play. And as I said last week, I do think there's a pretty good chance he'll start a bunch of games this year. I think that is making people more impatient with Gabriel than they otherwise would be. I mean, what other rookie quarterback who's played well enough to win 2 of the first 4 games for a bad team. What would you guys be trying to get out of there so quick?
I mean, I think it's just that the offense is unwatchable. I think that's as big of a problem as Shedeur.
Did you think it was unwatchable when it was Flacco?
Yeah, I mean,
it definitely got to unwatchable territory.
I thought they handcuffed Joe.
Yeah.
Which I think we're seeing in Cincinnati. I thought they tried to turn him into a check down Charlie.
He had the lowest ADOT of anyone in the NFL. Joe Flacco, of all people, had the lowest average depth of target in the NFL. That's wild, especially considering what's happening in Cincinnati, Ross.
All right, so then what you're saying is it's not really about the quarterback. It's about the offense and the skill position players and how they're operating the offense, as opposed to being about Gabriel.
I think it's kind of both.
Well, you just said that the offense was unwatchable under Flacco, and he had the lowest ADOT. So it sounds like to me, guys, I mean, I took a debate class in college. I could kill you guys. I could do this all day.
Yeah,
I just think both things. I think we can do the sports radio. Both things can be true with this, because it's like, yes, I do think there's parts of Stefanski that have wrecked this offense. I think his play calling. I think not only what he's trying to do with Flacco and handcuffing him was just wrong, but then I also don't think Dillon Gabriel's very good at football at this point either. So that's like I think both things can be true.
Yeah, I think it's way, way, way premature, too early to make any determination about Dillon Gabriel. Is my point. And I think if he were a first-round pick, which I know he's not, people would be, you'd be looking at the positives of what he's done as opposed to the negatives. I mean, look, there was a bunch of games, I don't know if you guys watched Tyler Shuck, who the Saints took high in the second round in his first start. That was not good at all. Or some of these other guys that have been rookie, Caleb Williams had a number of horrendous games last year. All I'm saying is, I don't know what Gabriel is. I tend to doubt he's a long-term NFL starter. To me, he seems like more of a backup, which is fine if that's what he ends up being. I just think you guys are a little bit quick for no reason to want to be making a change. I think, like I said before the bye, I'd give him 2 more games, see how he does these next 2 games, and decide after that whether you give him any more games after that. But then that would be 6 games, and then there'd be, 7 left? So, you still might have a season in which Shedeur Sanders gets the most starts, which seems like what people want for, any number of reasons.
They don't call me Nick the Quick for nothing there, Ross. What's your read on Tommy Rees taking over as play caller?
What was that?
You never know.
Well, that's a really interesting move. I'll tell you why. With it being the second year that Stefanski's doing it, I guess the best way to say it would be, I don't really remember many head coaches doing this multiple times and still keeping their jobs. So the fact that when they went into the bye, Stefanski thought this was the move is very interesting to me. I would also say, I don't know, I would never have said anything about it. You don't have to. There's nothing that forced you to do it. I would have gone into the game against the Jets on Sunday with nobody knowing that Tommy Rees was calling the plays. Why let the Jets go back and study any tendencies he had the year he was calling plays at Alabama, whatever that was, 2023. I mean, I wouldn't have announced it, number one. And then number two, the fact that Stefanski's doing this a second year in a row, that's kind of the first time it's given me some pause as to whether or not Stefanski thinks he is, in fact, on the hot seat and that he's trying to push whatever button or lever he can come up with to try to have a better second half of the year and, do enough to get another season in 2026.
So that is interesting you bring it from that perspective, because I think it was kind of a mixed bag between the fans about whether this means that Stefanski is in fact trying to preserve his job for next year, or whether this type of move means that he's kind of resigned himself to the idea that he won't be back next year. How do you see it?
I don't think it's the latter, because I think if it's the latter, they just seem, and look, I'm not in those meetings with whoever's in those meetings, Andrew Barry and Dee Podesta or whatever. I'm not in those meetings, but I don't know. It would seem to me like they at least have been pretty aligned as an organization, which I appreciate, even though obviously some of their big moves have not paid off. But for them to go about the draft like they did, and for Stefanski to go through this season like this, I just don't think they would have moved on from Flacco as early as they did if he really felt like he needed to win this year. You know, we talked about it, I think, last week. I can't remember what you said, Jonathan, but Nick said he thought they'd win, what did you say, 3 or 4 games, Nick?
3-win Wilson, baby.
Yeah, Nick said 3 or 4. I was in the 6-win camp. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they really have pretty good opportunity to get a couple more wins this month. I know they play the Raiders, they play the Jets, so they certainly could get some more. But I don't think he's resigned at all to that. He's definitely gone. But I do think, you know, if you're pulling this lever, I think he probably believes that there's a chance and that he needs to do something to try to create a spark or help this team win some more games down the stretch, do enough so that he gets 2026.
Did Andrew Barry miss the opportunity to jumpstart this rebuild by maybe trying to trade a Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, the way Darren Muji of the Jets did yesterday with multiple big defensive players?
You know, that's such a good question. I think the Browns, my guess would be that they don't think that they're that far away, and that because the defense is already really good and because they already have the 2 first-round picks, that if they can get – and because they have so many young players playing so well, I think the Browns, rightfully so, believe that if they can get average or above quarterback play, have another good draft, that they could absolutely be in the mix next year, and I would agree with that. I mean, I think they have enough there, especially on defense, that if they just get average quarterback play, and for that matter, average receiver play, and maybe that's free agency, maybe it's the draft, maybe it's via trade, that they would be in the mix to win 8, 9 games, whatever it is next year, and I would agree with that. I also think Andrew Barry and Darren Muji have very different timelines. You know, could Andrew Barry have traded Myles for a couple first-round picks? 1,000%, yes. But I think he probably recognizes that somebody else will be making those first-round picks. If you move on from Myles, you're probably not winning very many, if any, games. And, you know, Haslam and the fans, as much as anything, and you guys, patience would have worn so thin that he might not get that opportunity. I think he believes, after the trade that he made with Jacksonville, that he'll get 2026. And so I think everything he does is to win in 2026, because if they don't win next year, you know, that's probably it for him. Whereas Muji, I think Muji, this guy's genius. You know, it's so hard to just, you know, rebuild a team, right? And I think you talk to any of these GMs that get fired after like 2 years, and I think they kind of feel like that wasn't enough time. Well, now the guy has 3 first-round picks in 2027. So if you're the owner and you signed off on these moves, and he's got 3 first-round picks in 2027 and 2 in 2026, don't you give that guy at least through the 2027 season and maybe even 2028, you know, the second year of those 3 first-round picks to see how it pans out? My theory on Muji is he's just trying to buy himself time. I mean, we can debate whether or not it's the best interest of the Jets organization to do that. I think it's in the best interest of Darren Muji to try to have buy himself as much time to make the roster the way he wants it to. I mean, they're not going to fire him next year after he got him 3 first-round picks in 2027. So he would get 2025, 2026, 2027. I mean, the guy's going to get at least 3 full off seasons to try to make the roster and the team whatever he can make it. I always say this, guys, when in doubt in the NFL, people are making decisions that is in their personal best interests. That's really life in general, but certainly the NFL in particular.
No, that's a smart take. I believe in that, and it definitely tracks with how some of these GMs operate and how they move. All right, so within that logic, then, within that thinking, you sound like you're pretty positive about the Browns next year. But like a guy you might know because he covers the Eagles, and everyone that covers the Eagles there, Zach Berman, put out a tweet earlier today that said that these past 9 months won't be the end of stories about the Eagles' interest in Myles Garrett. They're going to resurface again this offseason. Do you feel like we're going to have the offseason of Myles Garrett trade conversations again, or will that just be kind of tucked away and not be an issue?
Well, what's interesting about that is I saw my guy Zach Jackson, Akron Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
I saw he reposted or posted I agree. So these guys don't usually just make that stuff up. Somebody must have said something to them to that effect. So where there's smoke, there can be fire. Obviously, Howie Roseman and Andrew Berry have a great relationship, and Howie is relentless. And, anybody that's ever seen Myles in these joint practices has seen him just totally dominate the entire practice to the point where they can barely even run plays. It's really, really impressive. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Eagles try to make another run at him. I just don't know how you do that if you're Andrew Berry. Unless, I'm assuming he's trying to keep his job as GM of the Browns. I don't know if you trade Myles Garrett this offseason, what are you getting back that is going to enable the Browns to have success to the point where you get to keep your job? That seems like another one where he'd be trading Garrett for first-round picks that somebody else would make. Which, by the way, Nick, you'll appreciate this. You know how the Dolphins fired Chris Greer, their GM, last Friday?
Mm-hmm.
And the trade deadline was yesterday. So they had an interim GM. His name's Champ Kelly, the last 5 days. That is the wildest timing ever. Because if you're Champ Kelly, right, you got to know that they're not going to make you the GM. You've been there. You were the assistant GM. They're not going to make you the GM. It's highly unlikely. So I just thought that the timing of that's hilarious. If I'm Champ Kelly, I'm trading these guys to whoever's going to give me the best job in the offseason. I'm like, hey, you want Jalen Waddle and Bradley Chubb? What kind of job offers do you have this offseason? Right? What are the guardrails there when you make a guy the interim GM 4 days before the trade deadline? I thought he actually did well to get a third-round pick for Jalen Phillips, and he held on to the other guys. I just thought it was funny that a guy's an interim GM for 4 days before the trade deadline and probably won't be with the organization after the season.
Yeah, but he might be with the Eagles, which would be a great stepping stone to get your actual job a year later. Ross, we got a boogie, buddy. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Ross.
Later, dude.
Later, dudes. That was Odyssey NFL insider Ross Tucker.